The knife was already in his hand when the girl realized he was not there to save her. Sunlight flashed along the blade, and the crowd leaned in, ready to watch something they would later swear they never wanted. She was tied to a horse post in the middle of a dry field, arms stretched back, rope biting into her wrist. Her mouth was stuffed with a rag, her breath loud behind it. Her legs trembled, not from weakness alone, but from knowing what usually came next when men stopped whispering and started watching. Salt had been poured in a rough circle around her feet. Little cloth charms hung from the post, fluttering in the hot wind like useless prayers. Someone had said the words out loud, and once they were spoken, no one dared take them back. The Mad Devil, that was what they called her now. Not Clara Reed, not the girl who used to fetch water and count pills for the town druggist. Just the thing they said had crawled inside her and made her dangerous. She twisted again, rope creaking, dust kicking up beneath her heels. A man in the crowd muttered that the devil was fighting the cleansing. Another nodded, relieved to have a reason for standing still. Then the mountain man stepped forward. Silas Blackwood kept his voice low. He left his gun where it was. He only walked, slow and heavy, boots pressing the grass flat with every step. He was big in a way that came from years of carrying weight, not from trying to impress anyone. A mule stood behind him, packs of fur and salt hanging from the saddle. Proof that he had come to trade, not to interfere, but the knife in his hand told a different story. And the town noticed that first, from where they stood. It looked wrong. A girl tied up. A mountain man with a blade. No one said it, but everyone thought the same thing. This is how it gets worse. Clara saw him then. Through sweat and panic, she locked onto the knife, onto his eyes, onto the shape of a man who did not belong to the town or its rules. She jerked forward, teeth snapping at the air, a trapped animal trying one last time to scare off the end. Silas stopped close enough to hear her breathing, close enough to see the rope burns, old and new, layered like someone had practiced this before. The mayor cleared his throat. He said the words they all needed to hear. It is for her own good. The knife moved, not toward her, toward the rope. The sound was small, almost nothing, fibers snapping, tension releasing, for a heartbeat. No one understood what had happened. Then Clara fell forward, legs giving out as the post stopped holding her upright. She hit Silas by instinct, teeth grazing his hand, fingers clutching his coat like it was the only solid thing left in the world. He did not strike her. He did not shout. He pulled his coat around her shoulders and lifted her up, blocking the sun and the eyes at the same time. The field exploded with noise. The mayor shouted about ritual and safety. The sheriff half reached for his gun, then stopped. Aware of how many eyes were watching him choose a side, someone yelled that the mountain man had stolen the devil. Silas turned once. His face was calm, but not kind. The kind of calm that came from having already buried worse things than this. "This is no devil," he said. His voice was low, rough, and carried farther than the shouting ever had. He set Clara across the mule's saddle, careful, like she might shatter if handled wrong. Then he climbed up behind her, knife already back in its sheath, as if it had never been meant for what they thought. No one followed. Before the road climbed into the trees, Clara stirred against Silas's chest. A sound came from her throat, not a scream now, but something cracked and human. Her fingers clenched in his coat, not letting go. Silas did not look back at the town. He had seen this before. Fear needed a shape, and when it found one, people stopped asking questions. Now listen close. Before we ride any farther, this story is retold from frontier accounts and local legend, with a few details shaped for clarity and meaning. And the visuals are AI made to match the mood. If you are still here, you are the kind of listener I tell the truth to. So stay with me and leave a comment, because this town needed a devil for a reason. And here's the part most retellings leave out. Silas was not the first man to see Clara tied to something. He was just the first one who didn't look away. Because before the week was over, the town would rewrite what happened in that field, not to make it kinder, but to make themselves innocent. And the moment they realized the mad devil had ridden into the hills, they would send someone up there, not to talk, to erase the proof. Silas did not know her name yet. He only knew the look in her eyes was not evil. It was exhaustion with teeth, and he knew something else, something every old man learns if he lives long enough. A crowd can turn anything into a ceremony if it keeps their hands clean in their own minds. They had salt and charms and a mayor with a confident voice, and that was enough to make cruelty sound like duty. Silas had seen sickness take a family once, and he had seen war take the rest. After that, he stopped trusting people who needed a simple story to sleep at night. He glanced back just once, not at the men, but at the post, a plain piece of wood made into an altar by fear. He wondered how many times this town had done the same thing to someone else, then called it protection. Clara shifted against him, and her fingers grabbed his coat like she was drowning. Silas tightened his hold and made a quiet promise he did not say out loud. If she was going to be anything, she would be a person again before she was a rumor. And if the town came up the mountain for her, they would have to climb through more than trees. They would have to climb through the part of Silas Blackwood that still cared about right and wrong. As the trees closed in and the valley fell silent behind them, Silas adjusted his grip to keep Clara steady. She was not calm yet. She was not safe yet. But she was no longer tied to a post while people decided what she was, and that raised a question the town would not want answered. If Clara Reed was never a devil at all, what did that make the people who needed her to be one? Silas did not head straight into the high timber. He knew better than that. Men who took something from a town did not vanish in a straight line. They watched roads first, then creeks, then the places a tired man would choose without thinking. So he rode slow and wide, following a cut through the cottonwoods where the river bent and the ground stayed soft. The mule kept its pace. Clara stayed slumped against him, breathing shallow, the heat finally loosening its grip on her body. Silas kept listening to the valley behind them, not with his ears, but with instinct. A town like that did not fear a girl because she was dangerous, and it feared her because she had seen something. And whatever she had seen was worth rope, salt, and public prayer. He did not know what was in that oilcloth yet, only that men didn't turn neighbors into monsters for no reason. When she stirred again, it was not fear this time. It was confusion. Her head shifted, searching for pain that did not arrive. Her hands tightened, then loosened. Surprised that nothing pulled them back, she tried to speak. The sound came out broken, raw from hours of screaming into cloth. Silas stopped the mule near the water and slid down. He untied the rag and handed her a canteen. She drank too fast and coughed, then laughed once, short and sharp, like she could not believe the sound came from her. "You did not have to," she said, finally finding her voice. Silas shrugged. Someone had to, that was all. They rode again, higher now, the air cooler, the noise of the valley falling away behind them. Clara sat straighter as the miles passed, as if distance itself was stitching something back together. By the time the cabin came into view, dusk had settled in. Silas helped her down. She hesitated at the door, eyes darting, expecting something she could not name. He opened it and stepped aside. No cage, no chains. Just a table, a stove, and the smell of old wood and coffee grounds. "You can sit," he said. "Or stand, whatever feels right." The first night passed without drama. Clara slept in fits by the fire, boots still on, knife within reach, even though she barely knew how to use one. Silas stayed up late, cleaning a rifle that didn't need it, listening for sounds that did not come. Morning brought a harder test. Clara woke with a start. Eyes wild, breath quick, the memory of rope and voices crashing back all at once. She knocked over a chair. She reached for anything she could grab. Silas caught her wrist, not hard, just firm enough to stop the spiral. "Look at me," he said. She did, and then she broke. Not screaming this time, crying. The kind that comes when the body realizes it survived something the mind is still running from. Silas waited it out. He had learned a long time ago that some storms burned themselves down if you did not try to outshout them. When she calmed, she pulled away on her own. She wiped her face with her sleeve, embarrassed, angry at herself for caring. "They think I am possessed," she said. "Or they say they do." Silas poured coffee. People say a lot of things when fear gives them permission. But fear wasn't the only thing moving through Bitterroot. Money was moving too. Quiet money. The kind that doesn't buy food or land. It buys stories, witnesses, and men who don't ask why. Silas didn't know that yet. Clara did. And she was running out of time to explain it. As the day moved on, pieces started to fall into place. Not all at once, not as a speech, just fragments dropped like stones along a trail. Clara talked while she worked her hands. Mending a tear in her dress with thread Silas kept for gear, she talked about the well water changing, about livestock getting sick, about the mayor calling meetings behind closed doors. She said she had tried to warn people. She said they smiled and nodded and stopped inviting her to supper. Then one night, the shouting started. Someone said she had cursed them. Someone else said she needed to be watched. After that, it moved fast. Silas listened. He let her talk. He listened like a man who had learned not to rush the truth. He watched how her hands moved when she spoke. Steady now. Careful. Not the hands of someone lost to madness. Late that afternoon, she reached into the lining of her torn dress and went still. She looked at Silas, measuring something. "If they find this," she said, "I am finished." She pulled out a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Inside were scraps of paper, notes, figures, dates. Silas leaned closer. He did not need to understand every number to know what it meant. "This is why they tied you up," he said. Claire nodded. Outside, the wind shifted. The kind of wind that carried sound farther than it should. Silas stepped to the door and looked out at the trees. He did not see anyone, but he knew the town would not sleep easy knowing the mad devil had ridden into the hills. "They will come looking," Claire said. Silas nodded. Eventually, she waited for him to say more, to promise something big. He did not. Instead, he set another log on the fire and handed her a plate. "Eat. You will think better with food in you." That night, as darkness wrapped the cabin tight, Clara sat by the fire and watched the shadows climb the walls. She did not look like a devil. She looked like a woman who had been pushed until pushing back was the only language left. And Silas saw something else. Not trouble, not danger. Responsibility. If the town came, it would not come for her alone. And that was a line Silas had crossed before. If you want the rest of this ride, hit like and subscribe, because the next footsteps up that trail are not friendly. Pour a cup of coffee. Tell me what time it is for you right now, and what state or country you're listening from. The first real trouble did not come from the town. It came from inside the cabin. The morning after the fire burned low, Claire woke before Silas. For a moment, she did not know where she was. Wooden walls, a quiet room, no rope, no voices. Then her body remembered before her mind could catch up. She shot upright, breath gone, hands clawing at the air like it might close in on her again. The chair scraped back, a cup shattered on the floor. Silas was on his feet in an instant, not rushing, not shouting, just there. "You are safe," he said. The words landed wrong. Safe was not a place Clara trusted anymore. She backed toward the wall, eyes sharp, scanning for exits, weapons, anything that might keep her from being trapped again. Her hands shook, not weak but overloaded, like a horse pushed too far without water. Silas stayed where he was. He had learned long ago that stepping closer too soon could turn panic into violence. The next hours were hard. Clara paced. She flinched at small sounds. She snapped at questions that were not even questions yet. It would have been easy to call it madness. Plenty of men would have. Silas had heard that word used to end conversations before. Instead, he watched patterns. She never lost track of where the door was. She never forgot where he stood. When she broke down, it came after long stretches of holding herself together. Not without warning. This was not chaos. This was damage. By midday, the storm inside her burned itself low enough for words again. Not many. Just enough. "They tied me up before," she said, staring at the floor. "Not like yesterday. Other times." Silas did not ask when. He did not ask why. People do not practice something unless it works for them. She told him about the first night, about men she had known since childhood, standing back while others decided what she was, about prayers spoken loud enough to drown out doubt. Silas listened and stirred the pot on the stove. Stew was simple food, hard to mess up, good for days when thinking felt heavy. When she stopped talking, he handed her a bowl. "Eat slow," he said. She did. The afternoon passed in small tasks. Claire swept the floor. Silas split kindling, nothing dramatic, nothing healing in a way you could see. Just time passing without someone telling her to sit still or shut up. That night, the truth came out sideways. Clara sat near the fire, knees pulled in, fingers whirring at the hem of her dress. Silas cleaned his rifle again, more for habit than need. They are not wrong about one thing, she said. Silas looked up. I do get angry, she said, faster than most. And when I do not hide it well. Silas nodded. Anger was not a crime. It was a signal. She went on. I saw what he was doing with the water. Not all of it, just enough to know it was not right. I spoke up. And once people decide you are difficult, everything you say sounds like noise. The fire popped. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, steady and patient. They needed me to be something else, she said. Something easier to handle. That was the heart of it. Silas had seen that trick before. Label a person. Strip the label of meaning, then do whatever you want. The next days were rough in quieter ways. Clara slept and woke at odd hours. Sometimes she laughed too loud at nothing. Sometimes she went silent for hours, lost in thought. Silas did not push. He showed her how to set snares, how to carry a bucket without sloshing half of it out, how to read the weather and the way birds move before a storm. Simple things, useful things. On the third morning, she surprised him. She asked to see his knife, not the big one. The smaller blade he kept sharp for work. He handed it over without ceremony. She turned it in her hands, testing the balance, thoughtful, not reckless. They always thought I would hurt someone, she said. But they never noticed how careful I am. Silas watched her closely. She handled the blade like someone who respected what it could do. That afternoon, she asked about the mountain trails, which ones froze early, which ones men avoided because horses broke legs there. Silas answered, if the town came looking, it would not come all at once. It would send a question first, then a rumor, then men with nothing better to do. Clara knew it too. Late that day, she pulled the oilcloth bundle from her dress again. She laid the papers on the table, smoothing them out. I memorized some of it, she said, in case they took this away. Silas nodded. Smart. Outside, a sound drifted up the slope, faint, metal against stone. Silas did not reach for his rifle, not yet. He listened. It came again. Hoof on rock. Just one. He moved to the window and looked down the trail. Nothing clear. Too many trees. Clara saw his face change. Someone coming. She asked. Maybe, Silas said. Or maybe not. He gathered the papers and slid them into a tin box, then pushed it deep under the floorboard. If it is nothing, he said. We eat supper. If it is something, we find out what kind. Clara nodded. She did not shake. She did not panic. She picked up the knife and held it the right way this time. And as the sound came closer, one truth settled in Silas's mind, that the town was not finished with her yet. The hoof sound came again, closer this time, and it was not a deer. It was a shod horse, stepping careful on rock. Silas did not move like a man surprised. He moved like a man confirming what he already feared. He slid the rifle off its hooks by the door, checked the chamber, and set it back down within reach. He did not point it. He did not wave it around, because panic was louder than any gun. Clara stood near the table, knife held low, her shoulders tight but steady. Silas raised one hand, telling her to stay quiet, and he stepped onto the porch. The evening air felt clean, cool enough to make a person believe the world could be decent. That belief never lasted long in the territory. A rider eased out from the trees, alone. He did not charge in. He did not act brave, and that alone was a warning. He rode like a man who wanted to leave breathing, and he stopped well short of the cabin. Silas recognized him before the man spoke. It was a thin fellow named Owen Pike, a trader who drifted through the valley twice a season. Owen sold coffee and nails, and he bought pelts from anyone who did not smell like trouble. He also listened, which made him useful and dangerous at the same time. Owen lifted both hands where Silas could see them, then kept his voice low. I'm not here to start anything, he said. I am here because the town is talking, and talking is turning into plans. Silas stayed on the porch. He did not invite Owen in, not yet. He did not ask about the girl either, because the girl was standing in the doorway where Owen could see her if he looked. Owen did look. His eyes widened. Then he quickly looked away, as if staring would make it worse for her. That small choice told Clara something, and Silas noticed her grip on the knife loosen a fraction. Owen swallowed, then spoke again. Mayor Thorne says you stole a possessed woman. He said he is telling folks you took her for ugly reasons, eh? And he is saying the mountain man is finally showing his true face. Silas let out a slow breath through his nose, and that part was predictable. Owen went on, words coming faster now. Thorne is offering pay, not a fortune, but enough to pull drifters out of saloons. He is telling them they are doing a public service, and he is promising the sheriff will look the other way. Some men already believe it, because believing is easier than thinking. Clara took one step forward, and her voice cut through the porch air, rough but clear. He's lying. Owen flinched, then nodded like he did not doubt it. He might be lying, ma'am, he said, but it will not stop bullets. Silas finally spoke. How many? Owen hesitated, then answered, not tonight, he said. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after, when they drink enough courage and find a guide. But it is coming, and I would rather you hear it from me than from the sound of boots on your porch. Silas studied Owen for a long moment. Owen was not brave, but he was not cruel either. Men like that survived by choosing the least deadly option, and tonight, he had chosen to warn them. Silas nodded once. You have done what you came to do, he said. Now ride out before you're seen here. Owen turned his horse, then paused as if something weighed on him. For what it is worth, he said. Some folks in town do not like what Thorne did. They just do not like being the first to say it. Silas did not answer, because that was the oldest problem in America. Owen rode off into the trees, and the hoof sound faded like a bad thought pushed away too late. Clara stood on the porch now, looking into the timber where Owen disappeared. They will come, she said. Silas nodded. They will. Clara waited for more. Some plan spoken out loud, some promise that would turn fear into comfort. Silas did not offer comfort, because comfort was not what kept people alive. He went back inside, pulled the tin box from under the floorboard, and set it on the table. He opened it, checked the papers, then closed it again. He wrapped the box in a piece of oilcloth, then tied it with twine. He was not treating it like money. He was treating it like the only clean bullet they had left. Clara watched him work. You believe me, she said, quieter now. Silas gave a small shrug. I believe what I see, he said. I saw a town tie a young woman to a post and call it holy. That tells me more about them than it does about you. That line hit her harder than a sermon, because it did not ask her to be grateful. It simply named what happened, plain and honest. Silas set the wrapped box aside, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a battered revolver. It was not fancy, and it was not clean, but it was solid. He set it on the table, gripped toward Clara. She stared at it like it might bite. Silas kept his voice steady. If they come, he said, you do not need to be fearless. You just need to be ready. Clara swallowed. I have never shot before, she said. Silas nodded. Then you will learn, he said. Slow, safe, and with your eyes open. They spent the next hour on basics, quiet and simple. Silas showed her how to hold it, how to keep her finger off the trigger until she meant it. He showed her how to stand, feet planted, shoulders loose, because stiff people missed and panicked people missed worse. Clara listened like her life depended on it, because it did. When she fired into a stump behind the cabin, the first shot went wide. She flinched, embarrassed, then looked at Silas like she expected him to judge her. Silas only said one thing. You stayed on your feet, he said. That is a good start. Clara let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. It was small, but it was there. Inside again, Silas ladled stew into bowls. He ate like a man who had eaten in worse places, and Clara ate like a person realizing she could be hungry without being punished for it. Between bites, Silas pulled out a rough map. Nothing official, just pencil marks on old paper. He traced a line with his finger. There's a narrow trail past the creek. He said, if we need to leave fast, we do not take the obvious way. We take the way that breaks ankles for men who do not know the mountain. Clara looked at the map, then at him. We, she repeated. Silas did not correct her. He just nodded once, and that nod carried more meaning than any sweet speech ever could. The fire burned low again, and night pressed against the windows. Clara sat with her back to the wall, not hiding, just choosing a place she could see from. Silas cleaned the rifle, then set it near the door where it belonged. For a few minutes, the cabin felt almost normal. Almost. Then the dogs outside. Silas kept two for hunting. lifted their heads at the same time. They did not bark yet. They just listened. Silas stopped moving. Clara felt it and went still too. From far down the slope came a faint sound. Not one horse this time. Two, maybe three. Silas looked at Clara, and his voice dropped to a calm that did not invite argument. "Put out the lamp," he said, because someone had decided not to wait until tomorrow. The lamp went dark, and the cabin changed its shape. What had felt small and familiar a moment ago turned into a box of shadows and listening wood. Silas did not move right away. He stood where he was, letting the dark settle, letting the night speak first. Outside, the dog stayed quiet. That was not comfort. That was warning. Silas eased toward the window and lifted the corner of the hide that covered it. Down the slope, between the trees, he saw movement that did not belong to deer or wind. Men walked different than animals. They carried weight wrong. Clara felt it too. She did not need to see. Her body knew when danger had added direction. Silas came back to the table and spoke low. "Not here for a fight," he said. "Not yet." He handed her his coat. "Put this on," he said. "If we move, you move when I do." She nodded once, no questions. They waited. Minutes passed slow enough to count heartbeats. The men outside did not rush. They circled, testing distance, listening for sounds that would tell them if the cabin held fear or resolve. One voice drifted up, careless, half-joking. He said something about easy money. Another laughed. Silas closed his eyes for a second. That laugh told him everything. He leaned close to Clara. "They think this is a story they already know," he whispered. "That gives us time." He slid open a floorboard near the hearth and pulled out a small sack. Inside were traps, wire, and a few tools worn smooth from years of use. Not weapons meant for men. Things meant to slow animals long enough to choose a better moment. Silas moved like a man cleaning his own house. No hurry. No wasted motion. He opened the back door just enough to slip out and vanished into the dark. Clara stayed where he told her. Her breathing stayed slow. Her hands stayed busy, not with fear, but with readiness. She thought about the way he had said we earlier. She thought about how strange it felt to not be alone in this. Outside, something snapped. Not loud, just enough. A curse followed. Sharp, angry. Then another voice, lower this time, said they should be careful. Silas came back through the door like a shadow folding itself into the room. He set a finger to his lips. "Two of them," he murmured, "maybe three. They are testing." Clara felt a heat rise in her chest, not panic. Anger, the old kind that had gotten her into trouble before. Silas saw it and shook his head just a little. "Save it," he said. "You will need it later." They waited again. The men outside argued in low voices now. Someone wanted to go closer. Someone else did not like the silence. Another snap, another curse. One of the men stumbled into view, limping, swearing under his breath. The others laughed at him, then stopped laughing when they realized where they were standing. Silas did not shoot. He let the mountain do what it always did. Eventually, the men pulled back, not retreating, just circling wider, frustrated, unsure. The night stretched on. By the time the first gray light touched the trees, the slope was empty again. No voices, no movement. Silas waited longer than necessary, then longer still. When he finally opened the door, the morning air rushed in like a held breath being released. They did not speak at first. Silas checked the perimeter. Claire stood in the doorway, coat wrapped tight, watching the place where men had stood and decided what they thought they could take. "They will be back," she said. Silas nodded. "Yes, but now they know this is not easy." That mattered. The day that followed was not peaceful, but it was quiet, the kind of quiet that sits on top of trouble like a lid. They worked. Silas showed Clara how to reset traps without leaving obvious sign. She learned fast. She asked the right questions. At midday, they ate cold food and watched the trees. No movement, no birds startled into flight. That afternoon, something shifted. Not outside, inside. Clara sat at the table, sewing a clean patch over the worst tear in her dress. Her hands moved steady now, practiced. Silas watched her for a moment, then looked away, uncomfortable with the thought that crossed his mind. He had not planned on anyone staying, especially not someone who made the cabin feel less like a shelter and more like a place. She caught him looking and raised an eyebrow. "What?" Silas cleared his throat. Nothing. Just thinking I need to fix that step on the porch. She smiled. It was small. It did not ask for anything. It hit him harder than the shouting in the field ever had. Later, when the light softened and the world slowed down, Silas handed her something wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it carefully, a knife, smaller than his. Balanced, the handle carved smooth, the wood dark with age. She looked up, surprised. For work, he said, and for knowing you are not helpless. She turned it in her hand, then closed her fingers around it like it belonged there. Thank you, she said. That night, they sat by the fire without speaking much. The dog slept near the door. The mountain held its breath. For a few hours, it almost felt like they had outrun the story the town was trying to tell, almost because far below, in a place where lamps still burned and men still talked themselves into righteousness, Mayor Thorne listened to the first report, not about a devil, about resistance, and he did not smile. Down in the valley, the story had already changed shape. By the time the sun cleared the roofs of Bitterroot, Mayor Thorne had heard 3 different versions of the same night. In one, the mountain man had fired first. In another, the girl had laughed while men screamed in the dark. In the third, the whole slope was trapped and cursed, and only fools went near it now. Thorne listened without correcting any of them. He sat in his office, fingers steepled, letting fear do its work for him. Fear, when handled right, saved money. He leaned back and stared at the map on his wall. Water lines marked in ink, property edges traced thin and neat. Everything he wanted sat right where it always had, just out of reach. The problem was not the mountain man. Men like Silas Blackwood were predictable. They defended what was in front of them and ignored the rest of the world. The problem was the girl, a girl who should have broken, a girl who should have disappeared into shame or silence. Instead, she was breathing free air and holding something Thorne could not afford to let surface. By midday, Thorne had made his choice. He did not go to the sheriff. Law asked questions. He went to the back room of the bank and opened the small safe he kept for matters that did not belong on paper. Gold coins, not many, but enough to speak clearly to the right ears. That afternoon, he started buying certainty. He spoke to men who did not farm and did not plan to. Men who drifted and drank and listened when money talked. He did not tell them everything. He never did. He told them a mountain brute had kidnapped a disturbed girl. He told them the girl had been through enough and needed to be brought back, alive if possible. He told them the mountain man was dangerous and armed. He did not mention rope or salt or a post in the sun. By evening, 4 men had agreed. By nightfall, 6. They were not a posse. They were not law. They were something older and uglier. A hired answer. Up on the mountain, Silas felt the shift before he saw it. The woods grew quieter in the wrong way. Birds stayed put. The wind carried sounds it usually swallowed. He checked his traps and found them sprung, not tripped by animals, cut. That told him enough. He returned to the cabin as the light faded, rifle slung easy, eyes scanning places men like to hide. Claire met him at the door. She had not waited inside this time. They are closer, she said. Silas nodded. Different kind now. They ate without ceremony, no talk of plans, no speeches. Afterward, Silas showed her how to load the rifle properly, slow and careful, not because he wanted her to fight, because knowing how took some of the fear away. He also showed her something else, the back of the cabin, a narrow trail that slipped between rocks and dropped fast. If it goes bad, he said, you take this way. Do not look back. Clara looked at him. Steady. And you? Silas did not answer right away. That was answer enough. The attack came earlier than he expected. Not at dawn, not at night. Late afternoon, when the sun was low enough to blind and men thought shadows belonged to them. Silas was checking a snare near the tree line when the first shot cracked. It tore bark from the trunk beside his head and drove him to the ground. He rolled without thinking, years of habit taking over, and came up behind a fallen log. The second shot came fast, rushed, a miss. 6 men, maybe more, spread wider than the drifters from the night before. This was not a warning. Silas fired once, not to kill, but to move them. The report echoed sharp and final. He ran, not blindly, not straight. He moved like a man who knew the land and trusted it to carry him. A bullet caught him in the shoulder as he broke into the open near the cabin. It was not clean. It burned and dragged him sideways. He hit the door hard and shoved inside, slamming it shut behind him. Clara was there in an instant. She did not scream. She did not freeze. She grabbed him under the arm and helped him to the table, her face pale but focused. "You are hit," she said. Silas nodded. Not bad. That was a lie, but not a useful one to argue with. She tore cloth, pressed hard, remembered what she knew from the druggist shop without needing to say it out loud. Outside, boots crunched, men laughed, too loud, trying to convince themselves this was already over. Silas checked his rifle with one hand. 4 shots left, maybe 5 if he made them count. Clara finished the bandage and looked at him. Her eyes were clear now. Not angry, not afraid. "They are not here for me," she said. Silas met her gaze. "They are here because someone paid them to stop a problem." That someone was not coming up the mountain himself. Outside. A voice called out. They said they just wanted to talk. Silas snorted, a sharp sound that hurt his chest. Talking men did not bring rifles. The first bullet shattered the window frame. Wood splintered inward. Clara ducked without being told. Silas returned fire, forcing them back a step. The cabin shook as lead found wood. Smoke crept in. The smell of burned powder filled the room. This was no longer about rumor or labels. This was about who walked away breathing. Silas leaned close to Clara, voice low and steady despite the pain. "When I say go, you go," he said. Clara shook her head once. "Not yet." Outside, one of the men yelled that they would burn them out. Silas felt the weight of the mountain press in. Time had run thin, and as the first flame licked up the side of the cabin, one thing became clear. The hired men had come to finish a lie. The first flame climbed the cabin wall slow, almost polite, like it was asking permission. Then the wind shifted, and politeness burned away. Smoke curled along the ceiling, thin at first, then heavier, carrying the sharp smell of pitch and dry wood. Silas felt it in his chest before he saw it spread. The shoulder wound throbbed in time with his heartbeat. Warm and slick under the bandage. Outside, boots scraped closer. Men shouted to each other, louder now. Brave because fire had started answering for them. Clara moved without waiting to be told. She kicked dirt over the flames, licking at the base of the wall, buying seconds that mattered more than comfort. Her hands shook, but they did not fumble. Silas braced himself against the table and pushed up. Pain flashed white, then settled into something he could work around. He checked the rifle again. 2 shots left, not enough. He leaned close to Clara, voice low, steady. "The back trail," he said. "When I say." She looked at the door, then at him. She nodded, but her jaw tightened. A window shattered inward, glass spraying across the floor. A shadow crossed the opening, then ducked back as Silas fired. The shot punched into wood and sent men scrambling. They were careful now. Careful men were worse than loud ones. The smoke thickened, stinging eyes, turning the room into a low ceiling of breath and heat. The dogs whined, confused, pressed low to the ground. Silas backed toward the wall that hid the narrow crawl space. He pressed a hand against it, feeling for the familiar notch. Another voice shouted from outside. They said they would wait. They said fire had patience. Silas almost laughed. He pulled the panel free and waved Clara through. "Now," he said. She shook her head. "Not without you." Silas grabbed her wrist. Firmer than he wanted. "This is not an argument," he said. She looked at him, eyes bright through the smoke. Then she did something he did not expect. She ducked past him and kicked the table hard, sending the pot of stew and a pile of dried herbs crashing onto the fire. Liquid hissed. Smoke billowed thicker, bitter and blinding. Silas stared at her for half a second, then nodded once. "Fine," he said. They dropped into the crawl space together, the world narrowing to dirt and stone and the scrape of breath. The tunnel ran downhill, steep and uneven, built long ago for bad weather and worse days. Behind them, the cabin groaned and wood cracked. Fire took hold of everything that had once felt permanent. They crawled fast, Clara first, Silas dragging his wounded arm behind him. The air cooled as they went, the smoke thinning until it was only a memory that burned the throat. They emerged into a rocky cut below the cabin, hidden by brush and shadow. Silas rolled onto his back, chest heaving, and stared at the dark sky. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then a sound rolled down the slope, a low, deep crack. The cabin roof collapsed inward, sending sparks up like angry stars. Men shouted. One laughed, sharp and satisfied. Clara pushed herself to her knees and looked back, eyes wide. "They think we are in there," she said. Silas nodded. Let them. They did not celebrate long. The mountain did not care about their certainty. A second crack sounded, closer this time. The heat had split the shale, and the ground had been waiting for an excuse. Rocks shifted above the burning cabin, loosened by heat and age. Silas felt it through the ground, a warning older than words. He grabbed Clara and pulled her farther downslope. The hillside moved, not fast, not all at once, just enough. Stones slid, earth followed. A heavy, grinding sound swallowed shouts and laughter alike. When it stopped, the slope looked different, smoother, quieter. Where the cabin had stood, there was only smoke and broken ground. Silas and Clara lay still, listening. No voices rose from below. No boots moved, only the wind, carrying ash and the smell of burned lies. They waited longer than felt necessary, then longer still. Silas finally pushed himself up, wincing. Clara helped him, her hand steady on his arm. "We are supposed to be dead," she said softly. Silas gave a tired smile. "Best kind of rumor," he said. They moved farther down the mountain as night deepened, following the creek where tracks washed away easy. Silas leaned on a branch cut to size, each step measured. They stopped when his strength ran thin. Clara cleaned the wound again, quieter now, focused. When she finished, she sat back on her heels and looked at him. "They will not stop," she said. Silas nodded. "No, but they will relax." Dead men did not testify. Above them, smoke thinned into the stars. Below them, the valley slept under a story that felt finished. Silas looked at Clara, really looked at her, and saw the same thought forming behind her eyes. If they were ghosts now, they could walk places the living could not. And somewhere down there, a man named Thorne believed the problem had burned itself away. They stayed hidden until the mountain cooled. Ash drifted down the slope like gray snow, settling into creases and pockets, carrying the smell of a story that had ended too neatly. Silas kept his back to a rock, eyes open, breathing shallow. The shoulder wound ached, but it was the honest kind of pain, the kind that proved he was still alive. Clara watched the valley lights flicker far below. Towns looked peaceful from a distance. That was how lies survived. They did not move at first light. They waited through the thin morning, through the birds testing the air, through the hour when men counted bodies and convinced themselves they were done. When they finally shifted, it was slow and deliberate. Silas favored his injured side, choosing ground that forgave mistakes. Clara walked ahead, eyes scanning, feet quiet. They followed water where they could. Creeks erased tracks better than any plan. By noon, the mountain had swallowed them whole. They rested under a stand of pine, out of sight of the main trails. Silas cleaned the wound again, teeth clenched, refusing help until he needed it. Clara helped anyway. "You should have left me," she said, not accusing, just stating the thought she could not shake. Silas shook his head. "Dead men do not argue their case," he said. She understood that. That was the point. By the second night, word would have reached town. By the third, it would have hardened into truth. Silas Blackwood and the Mad Devil burned together on the mountain, down below. Mayor Thorne poured whiskey for men who did not know how close they had come to dying for nothing. He listened to reports with a careful smile, nodding at the right moments. "The problem is solved," he said. Solved problems did not come back. That belief kept him warm. Up on the ridge, Silas and Clara watched the road that led toward Bitterroot. Not from above, from the side. Ghosts did not walk straight into town. They waited for the right moment. A supply wagon, a ranch hand heading home late. Anything ordinary enough to hide in. It came 2 days later, a small convoy heading toward town with lumber and feed. No armed escort, no hurry. Silas studied the driver. He knew him. Not well. Well enough. They stepped out slow, hands visible, timing it so surprise would not turn into panic. The driver nearly jumped off his seat anyway. Silas raised one hand. "Easy," he said. "We are not robbing you." The driver stared at Silas. At Clara. At the ash still clinging to their clothes. You are dead, he said. Silas smiled without humor. That is the idea. They did not ride the wagon all the way. They took it far enough to blend into traffic, then split off before the outskirts. Silas knew where roads narrowed and eyes grew lazy. By dusk, they were inside the town, not together. Claire went first, head down, dress borrowed, hair tied back. Another tired woman passing through. No one looked twice. Silas followed later, hat low, arm bound, walking like a man who had lost more than he talked about. The town felt different up close, louder, looser. People laughed easier when they thought danger had burned itself out. The bank stood where it always had, clean and solid, a place that smelled like money and patience. A banner hung nearby, welcoming a visiting official from the territory, a man there to inspect water rights and sign papers. Clara saw it and felt something settle into place. Silas saw it too. They did not rush. They watched. They listened. Thorne moved through the crowd like a man who had won something. He shook hands. He clapped backs. He smiled the way men did when they believed no one would ever ask the wrong question again. Silas leaned close to Clara where they stood among barrels and crates. Tonight, he said. She nodded. Tonight. They waited until the gathering shifted indoors, into lamplight and speeches. That was when men stopped watching doors and started watching faces. Silas and Clara moved with the crowd, not against it. They took seats near the back, where shadows were forgiving. The official spoke about progress, about clean water and strong towns, words that sounded good when you did not ask who paid for them. Thorne followed, voice smooth, practiced. He thanked the town for its courage. He mentioned sacrifice. He did not mention a girl tied to a post. Silas felt Clara tense beside him. He rested his good hand on the edge of the bench, not holding her, just there. When Thorne reached for the papers, Silas stood. The sound of boots on wood cut through the room like a dropped plate. Heads turned, whispers followed. Silas did not raise his voice. He did not reach for his gun. He simply walked forward, steady, injured arm visible, face unmistakable. The room went quiet in the way only shock could manage. Someone gasped. Someone crossed themselves. Thorne froze, smile collapsing into something small and frightened. That is not possible, he said. Silas stopped a few steps away. You are right, he said. You did not plan on it. Clara stood then. She moved past Silas, past the men who had once thrown stones and laid the oilcloth bundle on the table. She did not shout. She did not plead. She opened it. Papers spread across polished wood, to figures, to dates. Water rights signed and resold without consent. The official leaned forward, frown deepening. Clara rolled up her sleeve. Rope marks still ringed her wrist, faded but clear. This is what you called a cleansing, she said. The room held its breath. Thorne tried to speak. No sound came. Silas stood behind Clara, not looming, not threatening, just present. For the first time, the town saw the shape of what it had helped create. The official reached for the papers again. Slower now. This will require discussion. He said. Clara met his eyes. Good, she said. Outside, the night pressed close. Listening, inside, the lie finally ran out of room, and as Thorne realized, the mountain had not buried the truth after all. One thought cut through his panic. If the dead could walk back into town, there was no telling what else might follow them. The room stayed quiet long after the papers stopped moving. People did not rush for the door. They did not shout. They simply sat with the weight of what had finally been named. Mayor Thorne looked smaller now, not because anyone threatened him, but because truth has a way of shrinking men who live on borrowed fear. The official from the territory gathered the documents with care, like a man realizing he had been standing on a weak floor. He spoke plainly, not kindly, and not cruel. There would be an investigation. There would be consequences. That was all the law could promise. Clara did not ask for applause, as she did not ask for forgiveness. She stood where she was, hands steady, and let the silence do its work. Silas remained behind her, the way a mountain does not move just because the weather changes. He did not look proud. He looked finished with this part of the road. Outside, the night felt different, lighter, as if the town itself had exhaled without realizing it had been holding its breath for years. They did not stay long after that. Silas had no taste for speeches, and Clara had no need to prove anything else. By morning, word would spread. By evening, it would be argued. That was how towns worked. What mattered had already happened. They left Bitterroot quietly before sunrise. No banners, no escort. Just two people walking out of a place that had tried to define them and failed. They did not go far at first. Silas needed time to heal. Clara needed space that did not echo with old voices. They found it a few miles out, near water that ran clear and honest, a place where work mattered more than reputation. Weeks passed. Then months. The new cabin went up slower than the old one had fallen. That felt right. Good things usually took longer the second time. They opened the doors to anyone who needed help. A tired woman passing through, a child with a fever, a man who had learned too late that silence could cost more than speaking. No sign hung outside. No name was needed. Clara never answered when strangers asked about the mad devil. She would just smile, small and knowing, and keep working. Silas watched her do it once, then looked away, because some victories were meant to stay quiet. Now let me step out of the story for a moment and speak to you directly. I have been telling stories like this for a long time, and the older I get, the more I notice a pattern. Most harm does not start with monsters. It starts with people who want things to stay easy for themselves, and I have seen how quickly a crowd can decide who is difficult, who is dangerous, and who it is acceptable to hurt. I have also seen how rare it is for someone to step forward and say this is wrong, especially when it costs them something. That's why this story matters to me, not because of guns or fire or villains, but because while one man chose to see a person instead of a label, and one woman chose to keep her voice even when the world tried to steal it, there are lessons here worth carrying. The first is this: when everyone agrees too quickly, slow down. Consensus can be comfort, but it can also be cover. Ask yourself who benefits when a story spreads fast and who pays when it does. The second is harder. Anger is not the same as madness. A person pushed long enough will push back. Before you judge how someone reacts, ask what they have been reacting to. Another lesson is quieter, but just as important. Courage does not always look loud. Sometimes it looks like staying calm when others want a spectacle. Sometimes it looks like listening when shouting would be easier. And maybe the most important one, you do not need to save everyone. You just need to refuse to help hurt them. Silas did not set out to be a hero. He was tired. He wanted to trade his pelts and go home, but when the moment came, he did not look away. Clara did not set out to fight a town. She wanted clean water and honest work, but when she was pushed into a corner, she learned how strong she already was. I think about that often. How many times have we been labeled because it was convenient for someone else? How many times have we stayed quiet because speaking felt risky? Here's a question worth sitting with. If the people around you are wrong, would you know it? And if you did, would you act? Another question. Who in your life has been called difficult when they were really just honest? Who has been called dangerous when they were really just done being silent? Stories like this survive because they remind us of something simple. Decency is not loud. It is consistent. If this story gave you something to think about, take a moment and let me know. Leave a like if it resonated with you. Subscribe to the channel if you want more stories that take their time and treat people like people. It helps more than you might think. And here's one last thing I always like to add. Tell me where you are listening from right now and what time it is where you are. Are you starting your day or winding it down? I read the comments and I like knowing who is out there sharing this quiet moment with me. As for Silas and Clara, their story did not end with justice or revenge. It ended with work, with care, with choosing every day to live in a way that made room for others. They were never saint, they were just human, and sometimes that is enough to change everything.